Intelligence Studio. Do subscribe and like the video.
It was the most spectacular trial ever held in Vietnam, befitting one of the greatest bank frauds the world has ever seen. Behind the stately yellow portico of the colonial-era courthouse in Ho Chi Minh City, a 67-year-old Vietnamese property developer was sentenced to death for looting one of the country's largest banks over a period of 11 years. It's a rare verdict. She is one of very few women in Vietnam to be sentenced to death for a white-collar crime. The decision is a reflection of the dizzying scale of the fraud. Truong My Lan was convicted of taking out $44 billion in loans from the Saigon Commercial Bank. The verdict requires her to return $27 billion, a sum prosecutors said may never be recovered. According to a report by the World Bank, Vietnam's GDP per capita stood at $2,786 in 2021. Making the $44 billion fraud an astounding 15.8% of the country's total GDP. This highlights the massive scale of the theft, which is one of the largest bank frauds in history, dwarfing even the Enron scandal in the United States, which involved around $11 billion in fraud. Some believe the death penalty is the court's way of trying to encourage her to return some of the missing billions. The habitually secretive communist authorities were uncharacteristically forthright about this case, going into minute detail for the media. They said 2,700 people were summoned to testify, while 10 state prosecutors and around 200 lawyers were involved. The evidence was in 104 boxes weighing a total of 6 tons. 85 others were tried with Truong My Lan, who denied the charges and can appeal. All of the defendants were found guilty. 4 received life in jail. The rest were given prison terms ranging from 20 years to 3 years. Truong My Lan's husband and niece received jail terms of 9 and 17 years respectively. The trial was the most dramatic chapter so far in the Blazing Furnaces anti-corruption campaign led by the Communist Party's Secretary-General Nguyen Phu Trong. A conservative ideologue steeped in Marxist theory, Nguyen Phu Trong believes that popular anger over untamed corruption poses an existential threat to the Communist Party's monopoly on power. As the renowned Chinese philosopher Confucius once said, "The superior man is distressed by the limitations of his ability. He is not distressed by the fact that men do not recognize the ability that he has." Trong's determination to root out corruption, even among the elite, reflects his belief in the party's moral authority and the need to restore public trust. He began the campaign in earnest in 2016 after outmanoeuvring the then pro-business Prime Minister to retain the top job in the party. The campaign has seen 2 presidents and 2 deputy prime ministers forced to resign, and hundreds of officials disciplined or jailed. Now one of the country's richest women has joined their ranks. Truong My Lan comes from a Sino-Vietnamese family in Ho Chi Minh City, formerly Saigon. It has long been the commercial engine of the Vietnamese economy, dating well back to its days as the anti-communist capital of South Vietnam, with a large ethnic Chinese community. A report by the Asia Foundation found that the Sino-Vietnamese community in Ho Chi Minh City has played a significant role in the city's economic development, with many successful entrepreneurs and business leaders emerging from this group. Truong My Lan's rise to become one of the country's wealthiest individuals is a testament to the entrepreneurial spirit of this community. She started as a market stall vendor, selling cosmetics with her mother, but began buying land and property after the Communist Party ushered in a period of economic reform known as Doi Moi in 1986. By the 1990s, she owned a large portfolio of hotels and apartments. Vietnam is best known outside the country for its fast-growing manufacturing sector as an alternative supply chain to China. Most wealthy Vietnamese made their money developing and speculating in property. All land is officially state-owned. Getting access to it often relies on personal relationships with state officials. Corruption escalated as the economy grew and became endemic. As the renowned American businessman and philanthropist Warren Buffett once said, "It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it." Truong My Lan's meteoric rise and spectacular downfall is a cautionary tale of the dangers of unchecked corruption and the importance of corporate governance and transparency. By 2011, Truong My Lan was a well-known business figure in Ho Chi Minh City, and she was allowed to arrange the merger of 3 smaller cash-strapped banks into a larger entity that is Saigon Commercial Bank. Vietnamese law prohibits any individual from holding more than 5% of the shares in any bank. But prosecutors say that through hundreds of shell companies and people acting as her proxies, Truong My Lan actually owned more than 90% of Saigon Commercial. A study by the International Monetary Fund found that in emerging markets, the concentration of bank ownership can lead to increased risk-taking and financial instability, as dominant shareholders have incentives to extract private benefits at the expense of other stakeholders. The Truong My Lan case appears to be a textbook example of this phenomenon. They accused her of using that power to appoint her own people as managers and then ordering them to approve hundreds of loans to the network of shell companies she controlled. The amounts taken out are staggering. Her loans made up 93% of all the bank's lending. According to a report by Transparency International, Vietnam ranked 87th out of 180 countries in the 2021 Corruption Perceptions Index with a score of 39 out of 100. This highlights the widespread problem of corruption in the country, which has been a major obstacle to economic development and foreign investment. According to prosecutors, over a period of 3 years from February 2019, she ordered her driver to withdraw 108 trillion Vietnamese dong, more than $4 billion in cash from the bank, and store it in her basement. That much cash, even if all of it was in Vietnam's largest denomination banknotes, would weigh 2 tons. An experiment conducted by researchers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology found that storing large sums of cash in a home can be a risky and inefficient way to manage wealth, as it is vulnerable to theft, damage, and loss. The Truong My Lan case appears to be a real-world example of the dangers of this practice. She was also accused of bribing generously to ensure her loans were never scrutinized. A former chief inspector at the central bank was given a life sentence for accepting a $5 million bribe. The mass of officially sanctioned publicity about the case channeled public anger over corruption against Truong My Lan, whose fatigued, unmade-up appearance in court was in stark contrast to the glamorous publicity photos people had seen of her in the past. But questions are also being asked about why she was able to keep on with the alleged fraud for so long.
"I am puzzled," says Le Hong Heap, who runs the Vietnam Studies program at the ICS, Yusof Ishak Institute in Singapore. "Because it wasn't a secret. It was well known in the market that Truong My Lan and her Van Thin Fat group were using SCB as their own piggy bank to fund the mass acquisition of real estate in the most prime locations."
David Brown believes she was protected by powerful figures who have dominated business and politics in Ho Chi Minh City for decades, and he sees a bigger factor in play in the way this trial is being run. A bid to reassert the authority of the Communist Party over the freewheeling business culture of the South.
What Nguyen Phu Trong and his allies in the party are trying to do is to regain control of Saigon, or at least stop it from slipping away. Up until 2016, the party in Hanoi pretty much let this Sino-Vietnamese mafia run the place. They would make all the right noises that local communist leaders are supposed to make, but at the same time they were milking the city for a substantial cut of the money that was being made down there.
At 79 years old, party chief Nguyen Phu Trong is in shaky health and will almost certainly have to retire at the next Communist Party Congress in 2026, when new leaders will be chosen. He has been one of the longest-serving and most consequential Secretary-Generals, restoring the authority of the party's conservative wing to a level not seen since the reforms of the 1980s. He clearly does not want to risk permitting enough openness to undermine the party's hold on political power. As the renowned British historian Mr. Acton once said, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Truong's determination to reassert the party's control over Vietnam's economic and political landscape reflects the inherent tension between the pursuit of economic growth and the maintenance of political stability. But he is trapped in a contradiction. Under his leadership, the party has set an ambitious goal of reaching rich country status by 2045 with a technology and knowledge-based economy. This is what is driving the ever closer partnership with the United States. Yet faster growth in Vietnam almost inevitably means more corruption. Fight corruption too much and you risk extinguishing a lot of economic activity. Already there are complaints that bureaucracy has slowed down, as officials shy away from decisions which might implicate them in a corruption case.
That's the paradox, says Le Hong Heap. Their growth model has been reliant on corrupt practices for so long. Corruption has been the grease that kept the machinery working. If they stop the grease, things may not work anymore.
A study by the World Bank found that while corruption can have short-term benefits in terms of facilitating economic transactions, it ultimately undermines long-term economic development by distorting resource allocation, discouraging foreign investment, and eroding public trust in institutions. The Truong My Lan case highlights the need for Vietnam to strike a delicate balance between economic growth and anti-corruption efforts.
And do subscribe to the channel.